On the night of July 14th, 2025, astronomers at the Atlas Survey Station in Hawaii detected something that should not have been there. A faint smudge of light moving against the fixed stars. Not a satellite, not debris, not a known asteroid. The object was traveling at 60 kilometers per second, faster than anything gravitationally bound to our sun should move at that distance. The trajectory was wrong, the speed was wrong, and within hours, the designation appeared in the Minor Planet Center's database, 3I Atlas. The 3I prefix is reserved for interstellar objects, only the third ever confirmed. The first was Oumuamua in 2017, a tumbling, elongated visitor that sparked years of debate. The second was Comet Borisov in 2019, a more conventional icy body, but still from beyond our solar system. Now, 3I Atlas, a name that would soon be whispered in classified briefings and late-night radio shows alike. But here is what the public was not told in those first days. The object was not discovered on July 14th. It was detected 3 weeks earlier on June 22nd by NASA's Near-Earth Object Tracking Network. For 22 days, its existence was kept inside a closed loop of government astronomers, defense contractors, and intelligence analysts. When Atlas finally published the discovery, the object was already inside the orbit of Jupiter, inbound, accelerating toward the inner solar system. Why the delay? The official explanation, released in a terse NASA press statement on July 16th, cited verification protocols and orbital refinement requirements. Standard language, bureaucratic deflection. But buried in that same statement was a single line that should have raised alarms. 3I Atlas exhibits unusual photometric and spectroscopic properties currently under review. Translation: we don't know what this thing is made of. By mid-July, telescopes around the world were locking onto 3I Atlas. The European Southern Observatory's Very Large Telescope in Chile, the James Webb Space Telescope repositioning its infrared sensors, NASA's Swift Observatory, designed to detect gamma-ray bursts, was quietly reassigned to continuous monitoring. And then, the Mars orbiters. NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, ESA's Mars Express, the ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter. All three spacecraft, designed to study the Martian surface and atmosphere, began redirecting their cameras toward a single point in space. Not Mars, not Phobos, not Deimos, their moving target, still weeks away from closest approach. By late July, the object's predicted trajectory became clear. It would pass within 150,000 kilometers of Mars on October 3rd, 2025. Closer than any natural interstellar object had ever come to a planet in recorded history. Close enough for high-resolution imaging, close enough to answer the question no one in the scientific community wanted to ask aloud. Is it natural? Think of the solar system as a shooting gallery. Picture a cosmic highway where objects from other star systems occasionally drift through, most of them unnoticed, invisible, or too far away to study. Now imagine one of those objects not just passing by, but threading the needle, arriving at precisely the right angle at precisely the right time to perform a close flyby of a planet. Not Jupiter, whose gravity could plausibly capture or redirect anything nearby. Not the outer ice giants, but Mars, fourth rock from the Sun, the planet we've been obsessing over for decades. What are the odds? Astronomers calculated it immediately. The probability of a randomly oriented interstellar object entering the solar system and passing within 200,000 kilometers of Mars purely by chance is approximately 0.2%. 1 in 500. Possible, yes, but uncomfortable, like flipping a coin and watching it land on its edge. And then came the shape. Early August. The VLT spectroscopy data arrived. Not images, spectra. Light broken into its component wavelengths, revealing the chemical fingerprint of 3I Atlas. What they found was nickel, concentrated nickel emissions, consistent with metallic surface material. But here's the problem. Nickel almost never appears without iron. In asteroids, in comets, in meteorites, nickel and iron are siblings, geochemically inseparable. The solar nebula forged them together 4.5 billion years ago. You find one, you find the other. 3I Atlas had nickel, no iron signature. Dr. Avi Loeb, the Harvard astrophysicist known for his controversial analysis of Oumuamua and author of Extraterrestrial, was one of the first scientists outside classified channels to receive the preliminary data. In an interview published August 9th, he said, "A nickel-rich surface without corresponding iron absorption is not something we see in natural solar system bodies. It suggests either a formation process we don't understand or surface composition that is not natural." He did not say the word artificial, but the implication was there, hanging in the air like static before a storm. By late August, rumors were spreading through the amateur astronomy community, leaked orbital elements, whispered calculations. Someone on Reddit posted a trajectory simulation showing 3I Atlas would reach perihelion, its closest approach to the Sun, on October 29th, 2025, less than 3 months away. The post was deleted within hours. The user's account vanished, but the date remained. October 29th, perihelion. The moment when 3I Atlas would pass closest to the Sun, subjected to maximum solar radiation, maximum heating, maximum stress. If it was a comet, that's when it would erupt in a brilliant display of outgassing, water vapor, carbon dioxide, organic molecules boiling off the surface. If it was something else, that's when we would know. Think of perihelion as an interrogation under a heat lamp. Every object tells the truth. When it burns, a comet cannot hide what it's made of when the Sun strips away its surface. A natural body cannot fake its composition when subjected to the full spectrum of solar radiation. Perihelion is nature's lie detector test, and 3I Atlas was heading straight toward it. By September, the excitement and the anxiety had reached fever pitch among those paying attention. October 3rd was circled on every calendar, the Mars flyby, the moment when 3 NASA and ESA spacecraft would be positioned to capture the highest resolution images of an interstellar object ever taken. Closer than Voyager got to Neptune, closer than New Horizons got to Pluto on approach, close enough to see surface features, structural details, thermal emissions, close enough to see if it was spinning or not. Because here's something most people don't know. Every natural object in space rotates. Asteroids tumble, comets spin, moons wobble. It's a fundamental consequence of formation, gravitational. Collapse, collisions, tidal forces. Rotation is the universe's signature. It's how we know something formed naturally, chaotically, violently. A non-rotating object in space is like a perfectly still pond in a hurricane. Possible, but it requires explanation. In late September, preliminary light curve data from the Hubble Space Telescope suggested 3I Atlas was rotating very slowly, abnormally slowly. Some analysts said the period might be as long as 70 hours. Others argued the data was inconclusive, contaminated by outgassing or instrument noise. But one number was certain: October 3rd, 2025, 76 days from initial public disclosure, the day the Mars orbiters would see what we could not, and then nothing. October 3rd came and went. No images, no press release, no data. NASA's Public Affairs Office released a single statement on October 4th. Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter observations of 3I Atlas are currently being processed. Initial data review is ongoing. Further updates will be provided as analysis permits. Translation: we saw something. We're not telling you what. The silence lasted 5 days. On October 9th, an unverified image appeared on an anonymous image board. Low resolution, grainy, timestamp in the corner. OCT 03 2025 1422 UTC. The source was listed as HiRISE, the high-resolution camera aboard the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. The image showed a cylindrical object, grey, smooth, featureless. No craters, no ice, no dust, no visible rotation. Just a shape against the black, clean, geometric, wrong. The image was removed within minutes. NASA issued no comment. ESA issued no comment, but across secure email chains, encrypted messaging apps, and closed astronomical forums, copies spread, enhanced, analyzed, compared against known comets, asteroids, and spacecraft. The conclusion was unanimous among those who saw it. This does not look natural. 26 days to perihelion, and counting. Tonight, I wonder, if that image was real, what else did they see that we are not being shown? The morning of October 10th, a document appeared in the inboxes of 17 journalists, 3 astrophysicists, and 2 members of Congress. No sender name, no subject line, just an attachment, a PDF, 43 pages, titled Remote Viewing Protocol 7721X Target 3I Atlas. The file was dated October 7th, 3 days earlier. The header bore no official seal, but the formatting was unmistakable. Government document. Template. Classification markings redacted. Page numbers intact. Remote viewing, for those unfamiliar, is a controversial practice with roots in Cold War intelligence programs. The premise: trained individuals, called viewers, attempt to perceive distant or hidden targets using only their minds. No instruments, no data, no photographs. The CIA's Stargate project, declassified in 1995, spent over $20 million investigating whether remote viewing could provide actionable intelligence. The conclusions were ambiguous. Some sessions produced startlingly accurate details, others nonsense. The program was officially terminated, but certain private contractors continued the research, and certain agencies never stopped funding it. The document contained transcripts from 3 remote viewing sessions conducted between September 28th and October 5th. 3 different viewers, working independently, given only the target designation. Object 3IC Atlas, current. Location, current status. No images, no briefings, no context. Viewer 1, Session 1, September 28, 2025. Structure: metallic, cold but not frozen. Surfaces are intentional, not random. Angles are wrong for nature. There is depth, not solid all the way through. Hollow sections. Function, not accident. I sense waiting, purpose. It knows we are looking. Viewer 2, Session 2, October 2nd, 2025. Geometry: cylindrical, yes, but with internal divisions. Layers, like a building, but not for living, for storing, or transmitting. The surface is old, older than our system, but the interior feels active. Low energy, but deliberate. It's not dead, it's dormant. Viewer 3, Session 3, October 5th, 2025. I see light inside, not reflected, generated, faint, blue-white, like a pilot light that never goes out. The object is oriented, positioned. There is trajectory, but also intention. It came here on purpose, and it's waiting for something. A signal, a moment, alignment. Think of these. Transcripts as whispers in a dark room, unverifiable, unsettling, but persistent. You cannot measure them, you cannot test them, but they echo. Within hours of the leak, debunkers mobilized, skeptics on Twitter, bloggers, YouTube science communicators, all declaring the document a hoax, a fabrication designed to muddy the waters around a legitimate scientific mystery. The remote viewing community, they argued, has always been a magnet for charlatans and conspiracy theorists. Why trust anonymous sources? Why believe untestable claims? Fair questions. But here's the problem. Some of the details matched. On October 11th, an independent astronomer in Chile published a preprint paper analyzing polarization data from 3I Atlas collected in late September. Polarization measures how light waves are oriented after reflecting off a surface. Natural materials, rock, ice, dust, produce predictable polarization patterns. Smooth metallic surfaces produce different patterns. 3I Atlas showed negative polarization at certain phase angles, specifically minus 2.77% at a 7-degree phase angle. That's not impossible for natural objects. Some carbonaceous asteroids exhibit weak negative polarization, but it's rare. And combined with the nickel without iron signature, It deepened the anomaly. But here's what made people pause. Viewer 2, in the October 2nd session, described the surface as metallic and smooth 3 days before the polarization data was published. Coincidence? Cold reading based on earlier leaked information, or something else? I don't know. And that uncertainty is precisely what made the document so dangerous. It could not be disproven. It could not be verified. It simply existed, casting a shadow over every subsequent piece of data. By October 12th, the story had escaped containment. Podcasts, fringe news sites, Reddit threads with thousands of upvotes. The narrative was mutating. NASA knows it's artificial. They're hiding. The Mars images. Remote viewers saw inside it. The government is preparing us for disclosure. None of that was confirmed, but none of it was disprovable either. And then, the response. On the evening of October 12th, NASA's Planetary Defense Coordination Office released an unusual statement, not a press release, a direct video message from the acting director recorded in a windowless conference room, no graphics, no slides, just a man in a suit reading from prepared notes. Recent reports, circulating online regarding the interstellar object designated 3I Atlas, contain speculative and unverified claims that do not reflect NASA's scientific assessment. At this time, all available data is consistent with 3I Atlas being a natural body of interstellar origin. High-resolution imaging from Mars orbital assets is currently undergoing calibration and peer review. We will release findings through proper scientific channels when analysis is complete. We urge the public to rely on credible sources and avoid amplifying unsubstantiated narratives. The statement lasted 90 seconds. The director did not take questions. The video was uploaded to NASA's YouTube channel at 11:47 p.m. Eastern Time on a Friday night, prime time for burying news. But notice what was not said. He did not show the Mars images. He did not release the spectroscopy data. He did not provide a timeline for when analysis is complete. He did not explain the nickel anomaly, the polarization data, or the 3-week delay in announcing the object's discovery. He said the data was consistent with a natural body, not conclusive, not definitive, consistent with, a phrase that leaves room, a phrase that hedges. Think of this moment as a door closing softly, not slammed, not locked, just closed. With the light still visible through the crack underneath, the remote viewing document was never authenticated. No whistleblower came forward. No agency claimed or denied responsibility. It simply hung there. In the information ecosystem, impossible to kill because it was impossible to kill. And the 3 viewers' descriptions, metallic, hollow, purposeful, waiting, would be repeated, analyzed, and argued over for weeks to come. 23 days to perihelion. The countdown had become a drumbeat. Every day that passed without new images, without new data, without official clarity, the speculation grew louder. If 3I Atlas was just a comet, just an asteroid, just another piece of interstellar debris, why? The silence. What did they see on October 3rd that required this level of caution? On October 13th, Dr. Eric Quito, an astrophysicist at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics and collaborator with Avi Loeb on interstellar object studies, gave a rare interview to a small science podcast. He chose his words carefully. When we study objects like Oumuamua or 3I Atlas, we are always balancing 2 competing instincts. The first is to assume natural explanations, comets, asteroids, fragments from planetary systems. The second is to remain open to possibilities we haven't encountered before. What concerns me is not the object itself, but the response to it. Science thrives on transparency. When data is withheld, even for legitimate reasons like peer review, it creates a vacuum, and vacuums get filled. He did not mention the remote viewing document. He did not speculate about artificial origins, but his tone carried weight. This was not a fringe YouTuber chasing clicks. This was a Harvard astrophysicist on record, expressing concern about institutional opacity. The vacuum was filling, and what filled it was not certainty. It was questions. Questions like, Why did NASA detect 3I Atlas 3 weeks before announcing it? Questions like, what was on that deleted high-rise image? Questions like, could the remote viewers have been right? I'll return to that last question in Chapter 10. For now, let's focus on what happened next. Because while the world debated the remote viewing document, something was happening in orbit around Mars. Something the orbiters had seen. Something that had triggered a chain of classified communications between NASA, ESA, the Department of Defense, and intelligence agencies in 5 countries. We don't know exactly what was said in those communications, but we know the outcome. On October 15th, NASA announced an unscheduled maintenance window for the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. The spacecraft would be placed in safe mode for software updates and instrument recalibration beginning October 16th and lasting an indeterminate period. No data would be transmitted. No observations would be conducted. ESA followed 6 hours later with a near-identical announcement for Mars Express, and then ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter. Temporary suspension of science operations for orbital adjustments. 3 spacecraft, 3 agencies, 3 simultaneous shutdowns, all within 24 hours of each other. The official explanation: routine maintenance, long planned, coincidentally overlapping. The timing, 20 days before perihelion. You see the pattern. A shape is forming in the dark, not from what is being said, but from what is not being said. Silence is data too. Absence is evidence of something. And as October 16th became October 17th, as the Mars orbiters went dark one by one, a single question hung over the entire investigation. If 3I Atlas is just a rock from another star, why does it feel like everyone is afraid of it? There is a term used in intelligence circles: coordinated non-response. It describes a situation where multiple agencies across multiple nations independently arrive at the same decision: to say nothing. Not through explicit agreement, but through shared understanding of risk. No orders are given, no memos are circulated. Yet everyone moves in unison, like a murmuration of starlings, each responding to invisible cues, creating a pattern that looks deliberate from the outside but has no central command. That's what October 15th through 18th felt like. Think of it as a power grid during a blackout. One substation fails, then another, then another. Not because they're connected, but because they're all responding to the same overload. From the outside, it looks orchestrated. From the inside, it's synchronized collapse. Let's map the sequence. October 15th, 2025, 08:34. UTC. NASA announces Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter entering safe. Mode for software updates. October 15th, 2025, 14:22 UTC. ESA announces Mars Express suspending science operations for orbital adjustments. October 15th, 2025, 1947. UTC, Roscosmos, Russia's space agency, issues a brief statement that their planned Mars observation window with the Spectre RG space telescope has been postponed indefinitely due to scheduling conflicts. October 16th, 2025, 02:15. UTC, JAXA, Japan's space agency, quietly updates its mission schedule. The Hayabusa 2 extended mission, which had been tracking several asteroids, is reallocating observation time to higher priority targets. October 16th, 2025, 11:03. UTC, CNSA, China's space agency, releases no statement. But amateur satellite trackers notice the Tianwen-1 Mars orbiter stops transmitting telemetry data. The spacecraft is still active, still in orbit, but its downlink has gone silent. October 17th, 2025, 06:50. UTC, the European Southern Observatory, cancels 3 nights of scheduled observations at the Very Large Telescope in Chile. The official reason, instrument maintenance, but the VLT has 4 separate telescope units. All 4 are taken offline simultaneously for 3 nights, during prime viewing conditions for Southern Hemisphere deep space objects. October 17th, 2025, 18:30. UTC, the James Webb Space Telescope's observation schedule normally published 2 weeks in advance, is abruptly updated. 7 scheduled observations are listed as postponed. The targets are not specified. The new schedule shows a solid block of time marked only as Director's Discretionary Program, a designation reserved for urgent, unplanned observations that override normal scheduling. Think of this as a symphony going silent, instrument by instrument. First, the Mars orbiters. Understandable, they had just completed the closest flyby. Then the ground-based telescopes. Strange, but maybe they needed recalibration after weeks of continuous 3-eye Atlas tracking. Then the space telescopes. Now it's a pattern. And finally, the international coordination. Russia, Japan, China, Europe, all simultaneously stepping back from an object that, officially, is just a comet. By October 18th, the global astronomy community was in turmoil. Public observatories reported no issues. Amateur astronomers could still track 3-eye Atlas. It was visible with mid-sized telescopes, a faint dot moving slowly against the background stars. But professional access had been choked off. Not forbidden. Not censored. Just unavailable. Telescopes were offline. Observation time was reallocated. Data was embargoed pending peer review. On October 17th, an anonymous post appeared on an encrypted astronomy forum. The author claimed to be a data analyst at the European Space Agency. The post was brief. They saw it on October 3rd, all 3 orbiters. Full spectrum imaging, radar, thermal. The images are real. The object is not outgassing, it is not tumbling, it is not responding to solar radiation pressure. The way a comet should. And there is structure, not surface texture, structure, internal, geometric. We were told to halt all analysis pending DoD review. That's not how science works. That's how classification works. The post was deleted within 20 minutes. The forum administrators said they had been contacted by legal representatives and instructed to remove the content and preserve server logs. No charges were filed. No follow-up occurred. Just the deletion and the silence. But screenshots had already spread. Think of this moment as a dam beginning to crack. The water isn't pouring through yet, just seeping, one drop at a time, each drop carrying a fragment of the truth on the other side. On October 18th, Dr. Avi Loeb published an op-ed in Scientific American titled "The Cost of Silence in the Age of Interstellar Objects." He did not reference 3-eye Atlas by name. He did not mention the Mars orbiters or the remote viewing document. He simply made an argument. When an object of unknown origin enters our solar system, the scientific community has a responsibility to share data openly and rapidly. Withholding observations, regardless of the reason, undermines public trust and fuels speculation. If 3-eye Atlas is a natural object, transparency will confirm it. If it is something else, transparency is even more critical. Science does not benefit from secrecy, neither does society. The piece was published at 10:00 a.m. Eastern Time. By noon it had been shared 14,000 times. By evening, NASA had issued a response, not a formal statement, but a tweet from the official Planetary Defense account. NASA remains committed to transparency. All data regarding 3-eye Atlas will be made available through peer-reviewed publications as analysis is completed. Science takes time. Science takes time. A true statement. Also, a stalling tactic. Because here's what wasn't being said. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter had been operational and transmitting data continuously for 19 years. It had never required an unscheduled maintenance window lasting more than 72 hours. As of October 18th, it had been silent for 3 days, with no projected return date. ESA's Mars Express, operational since 2003, had conducted over 23,000 orbits of Mars. It had survived dust storms, hardware failures, and communication blackouts. It had never gone silent during a high-priority observation campaign, until now. And the James Webb Space Telescope, the most expensive and advanced observatory ever built, had never reassigned 7 scheduled observations simultaneously outside of emergency protocols, protocols reserved for supernovae, gamma-ray bursts, or gravitational wave events. 3I Atlas was none of those things, officially. So what was it? By the night of October 18th, the conspiracy theories had metastasized beyond control. YouTube videos with millions of views, Reddit threads dissecting every pixel of the leaked high-rise image, Twitter accounts claiming insider knowledge, posting cryptic countdowns, hinting at October 29th disclosure events. Some of it was noise, some of it was opportunism. But buried in the noise were people asking legitimate questions. Why did NASA wait 3 weeks to announce 3I Atlas? Why did all Mars observations stop immediately after the flyby? Why are 5 space agencies simultaneously stepping back from an object they should be racing to study? And the biggest question, the one that no one, in an official capacity, would touch: what did the orbiters see on October 3rd that triggered a global protocol of silence? Think of this as a courtroom where the jury is not allowed to see the evidence, but they can see the lawyers' faces. They can see the prosecution sweat. They can see the defense hesitate. And from those reactions they begin to form conclusions, not based on facts, but on the shape of the absence where facts should be. That's where we were on October 18th. 18 days before perihelion. The object was getting closer to the sun, brighter, easier to observe, and yet, systematically, every major instrument capable of studying it in detail had been silenced or redirected. Coordinated non-response. I want to be clear about something. I do not know if there was an explicit agreement between agencies. I do not have access to classified communications. I cannot prove deliberate suppression. But I can observe the pattern. And the pattern is this. When something unknown enters the solar system, the normal response is excitement. Telescopes compete for observation time. Papers are rushed to publication. Press conferences are held. Data is shared openly, rapidly, competitively. That's not what happened with 3I Atlas. Instead, we got silence. Staggered, coordinated, global silence. And into that silence, people poured their fears, their hopes, and their questions. On the night of October 18th, someone on an astronomy Discord server asked a question that would be repeated thousands of times over the following days. If they're not telling us what they saw, doesn't that mean they saw something they can't explain? No one answered, because the answer was too uncomfortable. 16 days to perihelion. We'll return to the question of what the orbiters saw in Chapter 8. For now, let's examine something else, something that emerged from the data that was still public, still accessible, still analyzable by independent researchers working outside. The chain of institutional silence. Because while NASA and ESA were going dark, amateur astronomers and university teams were still watching. And what they saw, in those final weeks before perihelion, would add another layer to the mystery. The object was changing. On the morning of October 19th, a graduate student at MIT published a preprint paper that would become the most downloaded astrophysics document of the year. The title, 7 Statistical Impossibilities in the Behavior of Interstellar Object 3I Atlas. The author, Stefan Burns, a third-year PhD candidate in planetary science, working under a professor who preferred to remain unnamed. Burns had no prior publications, no media presence, no reputation to protect or promote. Just data, mathematics, and a willingness to ask uncomfortable questions. The paper was 22 pages long. It contained no speculation, no bold claims, just 7 observations, each independently verifiable, each statistically improbable, and each, when combined, suggesting something that conventional astrophysics struggled to explain. Let me walk you through them, not as an academic exercise, but as a detective story, because that's what this had become, not science, detection. 3I Atlas entered the solar system on a trajectory that brought it within 150,000 kilometers of Mars. As I mentioned in Chapter 1, the probability of this happening by chance is approximately 0.2%. But Burns went further. He calculated not just the Mars flyby, but the entire trajectory profile. The object's path through the solar system was not a simple hyperbola. The standard shape for an interstellar interloper influenced only by the Sun's gravity. Instead, 3I Atlas followed a trajectory that suggested three-body gravitational interactions: Sun, Jupiter, and Mars. Think of this as threading three needles simultaneously. To enter the solar system at the correct angle, at the correct velocity, to be gravitationally nudged by Jupiter's outer magnetic field, and then to arrive at Mars at the precise moment when Mars was in a specific position in its orbit. That's not one coincidence. That's a cascade of precision. Burns calculated the odds: 1 in 47,000. Not impossible, but improbable enough to demand explanation. Natural objects in space rotate fast. Asteroids typically spin with periods of a few hours to a few days. Comets, even slower rotators, rarely exceed 20 hours. The physics is straightforward. Formation processes, collisions, and gravitational interactions impart angular momentum. A non-rotating object is like a car rolling downhill with no wheels. It violates the expected mechanics. 3I Atlas, according to combined light curve data from Hubble and ground-based observatories, had a rotation period of approximately 72 hours, 3 full days per rotation. That's not unheard of. Some trans-Neptunian objects rotate slowly, but those objects are far from the Sun, in cold, stable orbits, insulated from the chaotic early solar system. 3I Atlas came from interstellar space. Statistically, it should have been tumbling. Burns compared 3I Atlas's rotation rate to every known interstellar object, asteroid, comet, and Kuiper Belt object in the database. Out of over 1 million catalogued objects, only 0.03% rotated slower than 70 hours. 3I Atlas was in the bottom 100th of a percentile. Think of it as a spinning top that barely wobbles. Possible, yes, but it requires either extraordinary initial conditions or something stabilizing it. I've already mentioned the nickel without iron signature detected by the Very Large Telescope in early August. Burns revisited that data and cross-referenced it with every other spectroscopic observation available. Here's what he found: nickel emission lines, confirmed; iron absorption lines, absent; magnesium, trace amounts, inconsistent with chondritic meteorites; silicates, minimal; water ice, none detected; carbon dioxide ice, none detected; organic molecules, none detected. In other words, 3I Atlas was not behaving like a comet. Comets are dirty snowballs. Water, carbon dioxide, methane, ammonia, all boiling off as they approach the Sun. 3I Atlas showed no outgassing, no coma, no tail, just a faint, steady albedo, reflectivity, consistent with a metallic or rocky surface. But here's the deeper problem: the nickel signature was too pure. In natural solar system formation, nickel is alloyed with iron in a roughly 10-to-1 ratio. You find them together in iron meteorites, in planetary cores, in asteroid fragments. Separating nickel from iron requires extreme heat, extreme pressure, or industrial refining processes. Burns ran simulations. Could a supernova explosion, the death of a star, create pure nickel fragments? Possibly. But those fragments would also contain heavy elements: cobalt, chromium, rare earth metals. 3I Atlas showed none of those. Could a planetary collision eject pure nickel into interstellar space? Unlikely. Planetary differentiation creates iron-nickel cores, not nickel-only shells. The closest natural analog, certain types of carbonaceous chondrites, which contain nickel in isolated mineral grains. But those objects are dark, porous, fragile. 3I Atlas was reflective, smooth, and showed no signs of fragmentation despite traveling through interstellar space for potentially millions of years. Burns's conclusion: the spectroscopic profile of 3I Atlas is inconsistent with known natural formation pathways in stellar or planetary environments. Translation: we don't know how nature makes this. This one is subtle but devastating. When an object approaches the Sun, it heats up. That heat radiates back into space as infrared light. The amount of infrared emission depends on the object's size, composition, and surface temperature. NASA's NEOWISE telescope and the Spitzer Space Telescope, before its retirement, established thermal models for thousands of asteroids and comets. The models are reliable, predictable. 3i Atlas violated them. Burns analyzed infrared data from the James Webb Space Telescope collected in mid-September before the observation blackout. The object was emitting less infrared radiation than it should have been at that distance from the Sun. Specifically, it was 32% cooler than predicted for a rocky body of its estimated size and albedo. Think of this as holding a metal pan over a flame and finding it stays room temperature. The heat is being absorbed, redirected, or somehow not reaching the surface in the expected way. Possible explanations: subsurface insulation, exotic mineral composition, or active thermal management. The first two are plausible but rare. The third is not natural. Burns didn't say active thermal management. He said, the observed thermal profile suggests internal structural complexity inconsistent with monolithic natural bodies. Same conclusion. Softer language. I mentioned this briefly in Chapter 2. Polarization measures how light reflects off a surface. Smooth surfaces produce positive polarization. Rough surfaces produce negative polarization at certain angles. 3i Atlas showed negative polarization, minus 2.77%, at a 7-degree phase angle. That's rare but not impossible for carbonaceous asteroids. But here's the problem. Burns identified the polarization reversed at different wavelengths. Invisible light, negative polarization. In near-infrared, positive polarization. In ultraviolet, neutral. Think of this as a chameleon surface that changes texture depending on what color light you shine on it. Natural materials don't do that. They have consistent optical properties across the spectrum. A rough surface is rough in all wavelengths. A smooth surface is smooth in all wavelengths, unless the surface is layered, or coated, or composed of materials with wavelength-dependent reflectivity, something you'd see in engineered optical surfaces, like telescope mirrors or solar panels. Burns called it wavelength selective polarization inconsistent with homogeneous natural regolith. Translation: the surface is doing something surfaces shouldn't do. When sunlight hits an object, it exerts pressure, tiny but measurable. For small objects like dust grains or lightweight comets, solar radiation pressure can alter their trajectory. Astronomers account for this when calculating orbits. 3i Atlas was large enough that solar radiation pressure should have been negligible. But Burns noticed something in the orbital refinement data published by the Minor Planet Center. The object's trajectory was deviating from the predicted path, not by much, just a few hundred kilometers over several weeks, but consistently. The deviation was not random. It was directional, asymmetric, and aligned with the Sun. Two possible explanations: outgassing. When a comet releases gas, it creates a rocket effect, pushing the object slightly off course. But 3i Atlas showed no visible outgassing, no coma, no spectroscopic evidence of volatile release. Asymmetric surface reflectivity. If one side of the object is more reflective than the other, sunlight will push harder on that side, creating a subtle but measurable force. Burns calculated the reflectivity asymmetry required to produce the observed deviation. The result? One side of 3i Atlas would need to be 40% more reflective than the other. That's not impossible, but it's unusual. Natural tumbling objects tend toward uniform surface weathering over time. A 40% albedo difference suggests either recent surface modification or intentional design. Think of it as a sail catching wind. If the sail is symmetrical, the boat goes straight. If one side is larger, the boat turns. 3i Atlas was turning ever so slightly in a way that suggested its surface was not uniform. This one hadn't happened yet, but Burns predicted it. Based on the orbital data through October 15th, Burns extrapolated 3i Atlas's trajectory after perihelion, after October 29th, when it would pass closest to the Sun. Standard gravitational mechanics predicted the object would slingshot around the Sun and exit the solar system on a hyperbolic trajectory, heading in a specific direction relative to the galactic plane. Burns calculated the exit vector, declination minus 12.4 degrees, right ascension 8 hours, 17 minutes. Essentially, the object would depart roughly toward the constellation Hydra. But then he did something unusual. He ran a secondary calculation, assuming a small, non-gravitational acceleration during perihelion, a delta V of just 10 meters per second, applied at the moment of closest approach to the Sun. With that tiny course correction, the exit trajectory changed. New heading, declination plus 6.3 degrees, right ascension 9 hours, 42 minutes. Toward the constellation, Crater. Why does this matter? Because Crater contains the nearest known Sun-like star in that direction, HD 82943, a G-type main sequence star 49 light-years away, with at least 2 confirmed exoplanets. Burns wrote, if a trajectory correction of 10 ms or greater is observed post-perihelion, resulting in an exit vector aligned within 5 degrees of HD 82943, the probability of coincidence is less than 0.01%. Translation: if 3I Atlas changes course at perihelion and heads toward a star system with planets, we need to consider the possibility it knows where it's going. Here's what Burns did next. He calculated the joint probability, the likelihood that all 7 anomalies would occur simultaneously in a single object by random chance. The math is complex, involving Bayesian probability, multivariate analysis, and conservative estimates. But the final number was stark. Think of it this way. If you shuffled a deck of cards perfectly, dealt 7 specific cards in a specific order, then did it again and got the exact same 7 cards in the exact same order, that would still be more probable than 3I Atlas exhibiting all 7 anomalies naturally. Burns was careful in his conclusion. He did not say alien probe. He did not say artificial. He said, the combined probability of the observed anomalies occurring in a natural interstellar object is sufficiently low to warrant consideration of alternative formation and behavioral hypotheses, including, but not limited to, directed panspermia vectors, post-biological probes, and autonomously stabilized reconnaissance artifacts. Academic language. But the message was clear. If 3I Atlas is natural, it is the most statistically improbable object ever observed. If it is not natural, then everything changes. Burns's paper was uploaded to the Archive preprint server at 0317 UTC on October 19th. By noon, it had been downloaded 47,000 times. By evening, over 300,000. On October 21st, Archive removed the paper. The reason given: administrative hold pending journal submission review. That's not standard protocol. IArchive papers remain publicly accessible even during peer review. Removal only occurs for plagiarism, ethical violations, or rarely legal requests. Burns posted on Twitter, "My paper on 3I Atlas has been removed from Archive without explanation. I was not contacted. I was not given a chance to respond. Make of that what you will." The tweet was deleted within an hour. Burns's Twitter account was suspended for violating community guidelines. His university email auto-reply changed to out of office indefinitely, but the paper had already been mirrored on dozens of independent servers. PDF copies circulated through encrypted channels, Telegram groups, Reddit threads. You cannot delete information once it escapes. You can only make its removal more suspicious. On the evening of October 22nd, an anonymous email arrived in the inboxes of the same 17 journalists who had received the remote viewing document 12 days earlier. The subject line, "Burns was right." The email contained a single attachment: a grainy photograph, time-stamped October 3rd, 2025, 14:22 UTC. The same timestamp as the leaked high-rise image from Chapter 1, but this was a different angle, a different camera. ESA's Mars Express HRSC high-resolution stereo camera. The image showed 3I Atlas from the side. Cylindrical, yes, but with visible seams, panel-like divisions on the surface, and near one end, a faint geometric pattern, regular, repeating, hexagonal. Not craters, not erosion, structure. The email included one line of text: They saw it. They know. And they're counting down to something. 13 days to perihelion. There is a moment in every investigation when the circumstantial becomes undeniable, not proof, not confession, but the moment when silence itself becomes a statement, when the absence of explanation becomes more revealing than any explanation could be. October 29, 2025 was that moment. At 11:34 UTC, 3I Atlas reached perihelion, its closest approach to the Sun. Distance: 0.4 astronomical units, roughly 60 million kilometers, closer than Mercury's average orbit, close enough that the solar flux, the intensity of radiation, was 9 times stronger than what Earth receives. Think of perihelion as walking into the brightest spotlight ever designed. Every flaw, every crack, every hidden characteristic is exposed. A comet would explode with activity at this distance, water vapor erupting from subsurface ice, dust streaming away in brilliant tails, the nucleus fragmenting under thermal stress. This is what comets do. This is how they die or survive or reveal themselves. 3I Atlas did none of these things. Observatories around the world had been watching. Not NASA. The Mars orbiters were still silent, 2 weeks into their maintenance window. Not ESA, Mars. Express remained in safe mode. Not the James Webb Space Telescope. Its schedule still showed only Director's Discretionary Program, with no public details. But amateur astronomers were watching. University observatories were watching. Private research institutions, unbound by government directives or funding pressures, were watching. And what they saw, or rather, what they did not see, was the story. At 09 Seoul UTC, 2 hours before perihelion, the Crimean Astrophysical Observatory in Ukraine released real-time photometry data. The object's brightness was increasing as expected. It was getting closer to the Sun, therefore more illuminated. But the increase was linear, steady, no fluctuations, no sudden brightening that would indicate outgassing or surface activity. At 10:30 UTC, the Lowell Observatory in Arizona published spectroscopy data. No emission lines from water, no carbon dioxide, no hydroxyl radicals, the telltale signature of sublimating ice, just reflected sunlight, clean and cold. At 11:34 UTC perihelion, the moment of maximum solar heating, surface temperature models predicted 800 to 1,000 degrees Celsius for a rocky body at that distance. Nothing changed. Think of this as putting a block of ice directly on a stovetop and watching it remain frozen. Not slower melting, no melting at all. That doesn't happen unless the ice isn't ice. By 12 at UTC, the observational data was converging into a single, uncomfortable conclusion. 3I Atlas was not responding to perihelion the way any known natural object would. No outgassing, no fragmentation, no thermal bloom, no change in rotation rate, no change in brightness beyond the expected geometric increase from solar proximity. It passed through perihelion like a stone skipping across water, untouched, unaffected. On Earth, in a small radio observatory outside Bologna, Italy, something else was happening. The facility is called the Medicina Radio Telescope, a 64-meter dish operated by the Italian National Institute for Astrophysics. It's used primarily for pulsar observations, radio galaxy surveys, and SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. On October 28th, the day before perihelion, the observatory had quietly redirected the dish toward 3I Atlas's predicted position. Not an official observation, not a scheduled program, just a small team of researchers, acting independently, deciding to listen. They tuned the receiver to 1420 megahertz. That frequency is significant. It's the emission line of neutral hydrogen, the most abundant element in the universe. In 1977, the famous WOW signal, a brief intense radio emission of potential extraterrestrial origin, was detected at almost exactly that frequency. Since then, 1420 megahertz has been considered a universal calling card, a frequency any technological civilization would recognize. For 23 hours, the telescope listened. Static, background noise. The hum of the cosmos. And then at 11:41 UTC, 7 minutes after perihelion, a signal, not voices, not a message, just a brief, structured pulse. Duration, 4.3 seconds. Bandwidth, narrow, less than 1 kilohertz. Frequency, 1419.8 megahertz. The team ran it through every filter, every analysis protocol. It was not interference, not a satellite, not a terrestrial broadcast. The signal originated from the direction of 3I Atlas with an angular resolution, uncertainty of less than 1 degree, one pulse 4.3 seconds, then silence. The team debated for 6 hours whether to release the data. This was not confirmed. It could be coincidence, a random burst from a distant quasar, a glitch in the receiver, atmospheric scattering from a passing aircraft. Radio astronomy is full of false positives. But the timing, 7 minutes after perihelion, exactly when the object would have been experiencing maximum solar radiation, maximum heating, maximum stress. Think of it as someone waiting until the interrogation light is brightest before whispering a single word. At 18 UTC on October 29th, the Bologna team uploaded their data to a private SETI forum. No press release, no announcement, just raw data time-stamped and tagged. Transient event, possible instrumental artifact, correlation with 3I Atlas perihelion unconfirmed. Within 3 hours, the data had been independently analyzed by 7 research groups. 5 concluded. It was noise. 2 said it was ambiguous. None could definitively rule out a signal of artificial origin. And then, the response. At 22:47 UTC, the Medicina radio telescope received a visit, not from scientists, from representatives of the Italian Ministry of Defense, accompanied by 2 unidentified individuals in civilian clothing who presented credentials from an undisclosed agency. The telescope's data logs were confiscated. The observation team was instructed not to discuss the event publicly. The facility's internet connection was temporarily severed for security reasons. No arrests, no charges, just a polite, firm request for silence. By the next morning, the data had been scrubbed from the SETI forum. The original post was gone. The discussion thread was locked, and the Bologna team's public silence was absolute. But again, screenshots travel faster than deletion. By October 30th, the 4-second pulse had been analyzed by radio astronomers in 12 countries. Consensus. It was real. It was narrowband. It was not natural. Whether it came from 3I Atlas or something else nearby, no one could say with certainty. But the timing, the frequency, and the swift institutional response added one more data point to the growing pattern. Something happened at perihelion, and someone somewhere did not want us talking about it. October 30th, 2025. The trajectory correction. Stephen Burns, the MIT graduate student whose paper had been removed from arXiv 11 days, earlier reappeared online on October 30th. Not on Twitter, his account was still suspended. Not through his university email, still set to out of office indefinitely, but on an anonymous blog, hosted on a decentralized server, accessible only through encrypted links shared in academic Discord channels. The post was titled, Anomaly 7 Confirmed. Burns had obtained post-perihelion orbital data from the Minor Planet Center, data that was technically public, but buried in technical. Bulletins that few non-specialists would know how to access. 3I Atlas had changed course, not dramatically, not a sudden 90-degree turn, just a subtle deviation, a delta V of approximately 12 meters per second, applied during or immediately after perihelion passage. 12 meters per second. That's 43 kilometers per hour, the speed of a car in a residential neighborhood, barely perceptible across the vast scale of the solar system. But it was enough. Burns recalculated the exit trajectory using the new orbital elements. Pre-perihelion, 3I Atlas had been on course to depart the solar system toward the constellation Hydra, as predicted. Post-perihelion, the new trajectory pointed toward the constellation Crater. Declination, plus 6.1 degrees. Right ascension 9 hours, 39 minutes. Within 3 degrees of HD 82943, a Sun-like star, 49 light-years away, with 2 confirmed exoplanets, Burns wrote, "The observed trajectory correction is consistent. With a low-thrust maneuver executed at perihelion, the timing, magnitude, and resulting exit vector align with predictions made in my original analysis. The probability of this occurring naturally, through outgassing, solar radiation pressure, or gravitational perturbations, is less than 0.01%. I cannot state definitively that 3I Atlas is artificial, but I can state definitively that its behavior is not consistent with any natural object we have ever observed." He included the raw data. The calculations, the orbital plots, everything verifiable, reproducible, checkable by anyone with access to basic astrodynamics software. Within hours, independent astronomers confirmed it. The trajectory correction was real. The new heading was real. The alignment with HD 82943 was real. And for the first time since July 14th, the question was no longer, could this be artificial? The question became, how do we explain this if it's not? October 31st, 2025. The NASA statement. At 14 UTC on October 31st, Halloween appropriately, NASA held a press conference, not a video message, not a written statement, a full press conference carried live on NASA TV with 3 officials seated at a table, the administrator of NASA, the director of planetary defense, and the chief scientist of the Mars exploration program. The room was packed. Journalists from every major outlet, cameras, microphones, the kind of setup reserved for Mars rover landings or astronaut announcements. The administrator spoke first. His tone was measured, calm, institutional. Over the past 3 months, NASA, in collaboration with ESA, JAXA, and other international partners, has been closely monitoring the interstellar object designated 3I Atlas. This object has provided a unique opportunity to study material from beyond our solar system. Today, we are releasing preliminary findings from the October 3rd Mars flyby observations and subsequent tracking data. A slide appeared on the screen behind him, an image. High resolution, clean, unmistakably official. 3I Atlas photographed by the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter's high-rise camera. Cylindrical, grey, smooth, approximately 400 meters long, 80 meters in diameter. No visible craters, no dust, no ice, just clean geometric form. The administrator continued. Our analysis indicates that 3I Atlas is a natural object, likely a fragment of a differentiated planetary body from another star system. The lack of visible surface cratering suggests a relatively young exposure age, possibly indicating ejection from its parent system within the last few million years. The cylindrical shape, while unusual, is not unprecedented. Several known asteroids, including 1620 Geographos and 25143 Itokawa, exhibit elongated morphologies. He paused. The room was silent. The object's composition, based on spectroscopy, shows elevated nickel concentrations. This is consistent with fragments from a planetary core exposed by catastrophic collision. The absence of outgassing at perihelion indicates a depleted, inert surface, common in objects with long interstellar exposure. Another slide. Orbital diagrams, trajectory plots. The observed trajectory correction post-perihelion is attributed to asymmetric outgassing. Volatile release from localized subsurface pockets, too faint to detect visually, but sufficient to produce measurable thrust. This phenomenon has been observed in several comets, including 67P Churyumov-Gerasimenko. During the Rosetta mission, he looked directly at the cameras. There is no evidence, none, that 3I Atlas is anything other than a natural interstellar object. We understand that the unusual characteristics of this body have generated significant public interest and speculation. We want to be clear. Our findings are based on rigorous scientific analysis, peer-reviewed methodologies, and data from multiple independent instruments. 3I Atlas is remarkable. It is scientifically valuable. But it is not artificial. Questions erupted. What about the radio signal detected in Bologna? We are aware of that report. Our preliminary assessment is that it was instrumental noise or terrestrial interference coincident with perihelion observations. No corroborating signals have been detected by other facilities. What about Stephen Burns's probability analysis? Mr. Burns's work raises interesting statistical questions, but statistical improbability is not evidence of artificiality. The universe contains billions of objects. Rare events by definition will occur. Our role is to follow the data, not speculation. Why did it take 3 weeks to announce the initial discovery? Orbital verification for interstellar objects requires extensive tracking. We announced the discovery once we had sufficient confidence in the trajectory determination. Standard protocol. Why were the Mars orbiters taken offline after the flyby? The spacecraft required software updates and instrument recalibration following an intensive observation campaign. These maintenance windows are routine, standard, preliminary, consistent with. Every answer was technically plausible, every explanation was defensible, and yet the entire conference felt like a performance, lines delivered from a script, designed not to inform, but to contain. Think of it as a magician showing you the trick step by step, explaining how the illusion works, while your eyes still tell you something impossible just happened. The press conference ended after 37 minutes. No follow-up session was scheduled. The officials left the room quickly, ignoring shouted questions, and the internet exploded, because for every person the NASA statement reassured, it created 2 more skeptics. Not conspiracy theorists, skeptics. People who looked at the data, looked at the official explanation, and saw the gap between them. Asymmetric outgassing. Possible. But 3I Atlas showed no spectroscopic evidence of volatiles, no coma, no tail, no thermal signature of sublimation, fragment from a planetary core. Possible. But planetary cores are iron-nickel alloys, not pure nickel, and core fragments don't exhibit wavelength selective polarization. Statistical improbability. Yes, rare events occur, but 7 rare events simultaneously in one object. The statement did not resolve the mystery. It reframed it from "what is this?" to "why are they so certain it's natural when the data suggests otherwise?" November 1st, 2025, the countdown resumes. By November 1st, 3I Atlas was outbound, moving away from the Sun, fading. In 6 weeks, it would pass beyond Jupiter's orbit. In 6 months, beyond Neptune. In 2 years, it would exit the heliosphere, the boundary where the Sun's influence fades and interstellar space begins. And then nothing. A faint dot, receding into the dark, carrying whatever secrets it held back into the void. Unless something changed. Because there was still one date circled on, the calendar. One prediction that hadn't been tested yet. December 19th, 2025. According to the remote viewing document from Chapter 2, the one no one could verify, no one could authenticate, but no one could forget, December 19th was described as re-emergence, the day something dormant would activate, the day the waiting would end, 49 days away. And despite NASA's reassurances, despite the official explanations, despite every attempt to close the file on 3I Atlas and move on, people were watching. Because 7 minutes after perihelion, someone or something had whispered into the dark. And now the question was whether anyone or anything would answer. Information is the currency of the universe. Not matter, not energy, information. The specific arrangement of particles, the sequence of events, the pattern hidden in noise. This is what separates a star from a supernova, a molecule from a living cell, a rock from a machine. And this is what made the Bologna pulse so dangerous. Think of a signal as a message written in physics. It doesn't need language, it doesn't need intent, it just needs structure, non-randomness that stands out against the background chaos of existence. A pulsar emits regular radio bursts, but that's natural. Rotating neutron stars, physics in motion. A distant quasar flickers, but that's natural too. Accretion disks feeding black holes, but a narrow-band pulse, 4.3 seconds long, at 1400. 19.8 megahertz, 7 minutes after an anomalous object passes perihelion. That's not physics, that's syntax. By November 2nd, despite the data confiscation, despite the institutional silence, Copies of the Bologna pulse had circulated through enough independent channels that analysis was inevitable. A research team at the University of California, Berkeley, home of the SETI Home project, obtained the waveform data and ran it through pattern recognition algorithms originally, designed to detect artificial signals in deep space radio surveys. What they found was subtle, not a message, not a code, but structure. The 4.3-second pulse was not continuous. It was modulated, broken into discrete sub-pulses, each lasting approximately 0.043 seconds. Exactly 100 sub-pulses over the total duration. 100, a suspiciously round number. The team analyzed the amplitude variations within those sub-pulses. 63 of them were high amplitude, 37 were low amplitude. Not random, the distribution was too clean. If the variations were natural noise, you'd expect a Gaussian spread, more medium amplitude pulses, fewer extreme highs and lows. Instead, the data showed binary clustering, high or low, on or off. Think of it as Morse code without knowing the language. You can see the dots and dashes, but you don't know what they mean. The Berkeley team published their findings on November 4th in a peer-reviewed Rapid Communication to the Astrophysical Journal Letters. The paper was carefully worded. The observed signal structure exhibits non-random amplitude modulation consistent with binary encoding. However, no semantic content has been extracted. The source remains unconfirmed. Further observations are required to establish correlation with interstellar object 3I Atlas. Translation. This looks artificial, but we can't prove it, and we're not going to say aliens in a journal paper. The response was swift. NASA released a counter-analysis within 48 hours. Their conclusion, the amplitude variations were artifacts of atmospheric scintillation, radio waves distorted by ionospheric turbulence, creating false patterns in the data. Plausible, testable, except for one problem. On November 6th, an independent radio observatory in South Africa, the Meerkat Array, one of the most sensitive radio telescope networks in the world, released a statement. They had been monitoring 3I Atlas since late October, not continuously but in scheduled observation windows. On October 29th at 11:41 UTC, they had detected the same pulse, same frequency, same duration, same structure. But Meerkat is in the southern hemisphere. The Medicina telescope is in Europe. Two different locations, two different ionospheres, two different atmospheric conditions. If the amplitude modulation was caused by atmospheric distortion, the two observatories would have recorded different patterns. Instead, they recorded identical patterns. Think of two people on opposite sides of a mountain hearing the same melody. If the sound is being distorted by wind, each should hear something different. If they hear the same thing, the melody is real. The Meerkat data demolished the atmospheric interference explanation. The signal was real. The modulation was real. The structure was real. And now the question, was it from 3I Atlas, or was it something else broadcasting from the same direction at the exact moment of perihelion? November 7th, 2025, the second hypothesis. While the radio astronomers debated signal origins, a quieter investigation was unfolding in the optical spectrum. Dr. Melissa Huang, an astronomer at the Keck Observatory in Hawaii, had been tracking 3I Atlas since August. Not for NASA, not for any government contract, just personal curiosity and access to one of the world's most powerful optical telescopes. On the night of November 7th, she uploaded a technical note to an academic preprint server. The title, Unexplained Brightness Variations in 3I Atlas Post-Perihelion. Huang had been measuring the object's light curve, how its brightness changed over time, every clear night since perihelion. Natural objects exhibit predictable brightness variations as they rotate, with brighter sides reflecting more sunlight and darker sides reflecting less. 3I Atlas, with its 72-hour rotation period, should have shown a smooth sinusoidal brightness curve, gradually brightening, then gradually dimming, repeating every 3 days. Instead, Huang observed irregularities, small brief brightenings lasting 10 to 15 minutes superimposed on the expected rotation curve. not random. They occurred at regular intervals, every 23 hours and 41 minutes. That interval meant something. It wasn't the object's rotation period. It wasn't Earth's rotation period. It wasn't Mars's rotation period. It was close to Earth's sidereal day, the time it takes. Earth to rotate once relative to the stars. 23 hours, 56 minutes. But not exact. Huang ran simulations. Could these brightenings be reflections from surface facets, flat, mirror-like regions catching and reflecting sunlight toward Earth at specific angles? Possible. But natural asteroids don't have flat facets. They have irregular, cratered surfaces. Even metallic asteroids, polished by eons of micrometeorite bombardment, don't produce sharp, repetitive glints on predictable schedules. Think of it as a lighthouse. The beam sweeps across the horizon, bright, dark at regular intervals. Not because the light is moving randomly, but because something is directing it. Huang's conclusion, buried in the technical note's final paragraph: the observed brightness variations are inconsistent with passive reflection from a rotating irregular body. If confirmed by additional observations, the data may suggest active or semi-active surface features capable of directed light emission or reflection. Active surface features, not a comet, not an asteroid, something with parts that move, or shine, or respond. November 8th, 2025, the frequency match. On November 8th, someone connected the dots. An anonymous post appeared on a SETI research forum titled simply 1420 MHz. The post was brief. The Bologna meerkat signal was detected at 1419.88 MHz. The WOW signal in 1977 was detected at 1420.4 MHz, both within 0.6 MHz of the hydrogen line frequency. The hydrogen line is the universe's calling card, the most recognizable frequency for any civilization that understands radio astronomy. If you wanted to broadcast "We are here" in a way that anyone listening would recognize, you'd use 1420 MHz. That's not coincidence, that's intent. The post was unsigned, but the reasoning was sound. 1420 MHz is special. Neutral hydrogen atoms, the most common atoms in the universe, emit radiation at that exact frequency when their electrons flip spin states. Any civilization capable of radio astronomy would know this. It's a universal constant written into the fabric of physics. Broadcasting at or near that frequency is like shouting in a language everyone speaks. The WOW signal, detected in 1977 by Ohio State University's Big Ear radio telescope, remains one of the most famous unsolved mysteries in SETI history. A strong, narrow-band signal, lasting 72 seconds, matching no known terrestrial or astronomical source. The researcher on duty circled the printout and wrote "WOW" in the margin. The signal was never detected again. For 48 years, that signal has been debated, analyzed, and mythologized. Natural phenomenon? Terrestrial interference? Or something else? And now in 2025, another signal at the same frequency, during an event involving an object exhibiting 7 statistical impossibilities. The forum post ended with a question. What if the WOW signal wasn't a one-time accident? What if it was a test broadcast? And what if 3i Atlas is the follow-up? No one answered, because the question was too large, too speculative, too untestable. But it hung there, in the collective consciousness of everyone following the story, like a shadow growing longer as the sun sets. By November 8th, the pieces were scattered across the table. The trajectory correction, the radio pulse, the brightness variations, the frequency match, Stefan Burns's 7 impossibilities, NASA's carefully crafted denials. None of it was proof, but together the pieces formed a shape, not a complete picture, not a solved puzzle, just an outline, faint but recognizable, of something we had no framework to process. The question was no longer, is 3i Atlas natural or artificial? The question had become, if it's artificial, what is it doing and who sent it? 41 days until December 19th, until re-emergence, whatever that meant. There is a document that most people don't know exists. It's called the International Academy of Astronautics SETI Post-Detection Protocol, drafted in 1989 and updated several times since. It outlines what humanity should do if we detect a signal from an extraterrestrial civilization. Step 1. Verify the signal independently. Step 2. Notify relevant national and international authorities. Step 3. Inform the public through official channels. Step 4. Do not respond until international consensus is reached. It's a reasonable framework. Calm. Measured. Built on the assumption that first contact would be a radio signal from light years away. Distant, safe, theoretical. No one wrote a protocol for what to do when first contact arrives unannounced, passes within photographing distance of Mars, adjusts its trajectory toward a star system with planets, and begins exhibiting behavior that suggests a countdown to activation. By late November, institutions around the world were quietly asking, what do we do if December 19th isn't nothing? Think of it as writing an evacuation plan for a building while the fire is already spreading through the walls. You're not being alarmist, you're being responsible, but the act of planning acknowledges the possibility of disaster. On November 21st, a classified meeting occurred at the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs in Vienna. The attendees list was never made public, but sources confirmed representatives from 15 nations, including the United States, China, Russia, the European Union, Japan, India, and Brazil. The stated agenda: coordination procedures for anomalous solar system events. Anomalous, that word again. Not threatening, not alien, anomalous. The meeting lasted 9 hours. No press release followed, no joint statement, just a brief update on the UNUSA website. Member states discussed frameworks for information sharing regarding near-Earth objects and interstellar phenomena. But 3 decisions emerged, pieced together from diplomatic sources and leaked communications. First, a shared data repository would be established, accessible to all participating nations, for real-time tracking and analysis of 3I Atlas. No more information silos, no more selective disclosure. Second, a joint communication working group would draft public messaging scenarios for different outcomes on December 19th. Best case, nothing happens. Moderate case, unusual but explainable activity. Worst case, unambiguous evidence of artificial origin. Third, each participating nation would activate internal contingency protocols for low-probability, high-impact space events. No evacuations, no military mobilization, just heightened readiness, senior officials on call, communication channels tested, response teams briefed. Think of it as turning on the lights in a dark room, not because you've seen something, but because you want to be ready if you do. The fact that these decisions were made, the fact that 15 nations agreed to coordinate at this level sent a signal louder than any official statement. They were taking it seriously. November 22, 2025, the public prediction models. While governments prepared quietly, the public prepared loudly. The Open Atlas project, now grown to over 900 participants, launched a predictive modeling initiative. The goal: use all available data to forecast what might happen on December 19th. They called it the Re-emergence Scenario Matrix. The models were built on observable trends, brightness variation intervals, accelerating towards 0 on December 18th. Trajectory: aligned with HD 82943, a sun-like star with exoplanets. Radio emissions: 1 confirmed pulse at perihelion, frequency near 1420 MHz. Surface features: geometric patterns, possible structural elements. Thermal behavior: anomalously low infrared emissions suggesting internal insulation. From these inputs, the network generated 5 scenarios ranked by plausibility. Scenario 1, passive observation, 42%. Probability: 3I Atlas continues outbound, brightness variations stabilize or cease, no further signals detected. The object is a probe, but its mission is observation only. December 19th is simply when its data collection cycle completes, not when it transmits or activates. Scenario 2, Data transmission, 28% probability. On or around December 19th, 3I Atlas emits a strong, structured radio signal, either back toward its origin or toward its next destination. The signal could be telemetry, collected data, or a beacon indicating mission completion. Duration, minutes to hours, then silence. Scenario 3, course correction, 18% probability. The object executes a secondary trajectory adjustment, further refining its path toward HD 82943 or another target. Observable through refined orbital tracking. No other activity. Scenario 4, staged deployment, 8% probability. 3I Atlas separates into multiple components, releasing smaller probes, ejecting subsystems, or shedding protective layers. This would explain the seam observed in the high-rise image, high visual impact but not necessarily threatening. Scenario 5, active engagement, 4% probability. The object attempts communication with Earth, either through directed signals or other means. This could range from a simple repeating message to complex data packets. Intent unknown, response protocol undefined. The matrix was posted publicly on November 22nd, accompanied by a disclaimer. These scenarios are speculative projections based on incomplete data. They are not predictions. They are frameworks for thinking about possibilities. We share them not to create alarm, but to encourage preparation and rational discussion. Within 12 hours, the matrix had been shared 300,000 times. Think of it as drawing a map of a coastline you've never visited, based on descriptions from people who saw it from a distance. The map might be wrong, but it's better than sailing blind. November 23rd, 2025, the message drafts. On November 23rd, something extraordinary happened. The SETI Institute in California, in collaboration with the Messaging Extraterrestrial Intelligence (METI) research group, announced they were drafting a response message just in case Scenario 5 occurred. Not to transmit, not to broadcast, just to have ready. The announcement was careful. In the unlikely event that 3I Atlas or any associated phenomena demonstrate intentional communication capability, humanity should be prepared to respond thoughtfully and collectively. We are developing a draft message that conveys basic information about Earth, humanity, and our peaceful intentions, while avoiding assumptions about the recipient's language, biology, or motivations. The draft message would be mathematical, based on prime numbers, hydrogen emission frequency, and universal physical constants. Visual, including diagrams of the solar system, Earth's position, and basic human biology. Non-threatening, no military imagery, no aggressive postures, no territorial claims. Inclusive, representing multiple languages, cultures, and perspectives. The SETI Institute invited public input. Within 24 hours, they received over 50,000 submissions, messages in dozens of languages, artwork, music, mathematical proofs, poems, questions. Some submissions were heartfelt. We are here. We are listening. We are not alone. Some were practical. If you can understand this, please respond using prime number sequences. Some were philosophical. What is the purpose of consciousness in the universe? And some were simply human. Hello, we've been waiting for you. Think of it as writing a letter to someone you're not sure exists, in a language you're not sure they speak, about a meeting you're not sure will happen. But the act of writing it, the collective effort, the hope, the attempt at connection, says something about who we are. November 24th, 2025, the fear spreads not. Everyone was hopeful. By late November, a darker narrative was gaining traction in certain corners of the internet and among some public intellectuals. The argument went like this: if 3I Atlas is a probe, and if it adjusted its course after studying our solar system, that means it made a decision. And we don't know what that decision was based on. Did it assess our technology level, our radio emissions, our military capabilities, our environmental degradation? And if it's heading toward HD, 82943, a star 49 light-years away, that means it's either returning to report or moving to the next target. Either way, it's not here to stay. It's not here to help. It's here to observe, analyze, and move on. And that raised the most uncomfortable question of all. What if we were evaluated and found insufficient? A former Pentagon consultant published an op-ed titled "The Vulnerability Paradox." For decades, we've broadcast our presence into space, radio, television, radar signals, leaking into the cosmos, announcing, "We are here." We assumed that any civilization capable of interstellar travel would be benevolent, curious, enlightened. But what if that assumption is wrong? What if the universe is a dark forest and we've been lighting signal fires? The op-ed didn't advocate panic, it advocated caution, but the framing, dark forest, vulnerability, evaluation, fed into primal fears. Think of it as realizing for the first time that you've been living in a house with no locks, and now you hear footsteps on the porch. By November 25th, online search trends showed spikes in terms like interstellar threat, alien invasion scenarios, planetary defense protocols. YouTube videos with millions of views dissected worst-case scenarios. What if 3i Atlas was a scout for a larger fleet? What if December 19th was a signal for others to arrive? What if humanity was being surveyed for colonization, conquest, or elimination? None of this was based on evidence. But fear doesn't require evidence. It just requires uncertainty and imagination. And we had plenty of both. November 25th, 2025. The White House briefing. On the evening of November 25th, the White House press secretary held a briefing. It was not listed on the daily schedule, no advance notice. Just a sudden announcement, briefing in 30 minutes. The room filled quickly. The press secretary read from prepared remarks. The President has been receiving regular updates on the Interstellar object designated 3i Atlas. We are working closely with NASA, international partners, and the scientific community to monitor the object's trajectory and characteristics. At this time, there is no evidence of any threat to Earth or its inhabitants. We encourage the public to rely on credible scientific sources and avoid speculation based on unverified claims. The administration is committed to transparency and will provide updates as new information becomes available. Questions erupted. Is the President preparing for contact on December 19th? The President is monitoring all relevant developments through appropriate channels. Has the military been placed on alert? There is no change to our defense posture. Do you believe 3i Atlas is artificial? That is a question for the scientific community, not for this office. The briefing lasted 11 minutes. The press secretary left without taking follow-up questions. Think of it as watching someone try to calm a room by speaking very quietly, hoping no one notices they're sweating. The briefing didn't reassure anyone. It confirmed what people already suspected. The government was paying attention, preparing for contingencies, and absolutely not telling the full story. By November 25th, the world had split into three camps. The skeptics, people who believed 3i Atlas was natural, the images were misinterpreted, the anomalies were explainable, and December 19th would pass without incident. The hopefuls, people who believed 3i Atlas might be artificial, that first contact was possible, that humanity was on the verge of a profound transformation. The fearful, people who believed something was coming, something unknown, and that governments were either unprepared or hiding the truth. 24 days until December 19th. And in the skies above Earth, telescopes from 100 nations were locked on a single point of light, receding slowly into the dark, counting down toward a date no one could explain. But everyone was watching. Silence in space is the default state. The universe is not loud, it does not shout. The vast majority of electromagnetic radiation washing over Earth every second is natural. Starlight, cosmic microwave background, radio emissions from pulsars and quasars, the hiss of interstellar plasma. But within that silence, patterns can emerge, and patterns, if structured enough, become signals. By late November, radio observatories around the world had turned their full attention to 3i Atlas, not waiting for December 19th, listening now, continuously. The Medicina telescope in Italy, Meerkat in South Africa, the Very Large Array in New Mexico. Arecibo's successor facilities in Puerto Rico, the 500-meter aperture spherical telescope in China, the Australian square-kilometer array pathfinder. Think of it as a planetary vigil, hundreds of dishes pointed toward a single object, waiting for it to speak again. For 9 days, they heard nothing. November 26th, static. November 27th, static. November 28th, static. The brightness variations continued accelerating. The Open Atlas Project's models held, intervals shortening steadily, converging toward December 18th. But the radio spectrum remained silent. On November 30th, a researcher at the SETI Institute published a short analysis titled The Transmission Window Hypothesis. The argument was straightforward. If 3I Atlas is a probe designed to observe and report, it would optimize its transmission for maximum efficiency. That means waiting until conditions are ideal, specifically when the object is positioned such that its signal can reach both its origin point and any potential secondary targets with minimal power expenditure. The researcher calculated the optimal transmission window based on 3I Atlas's trajectory, velocity, and the assumption that it was communicating back toward the direction it came from, roughly the constellation Lyra, home to the star Vega. The optimal window, December 15th through December 20th. During that period, 3I Atlas would be far enough from the Sun to avoid interference, angled optimally for line-of-sight transmission toward Lyra, and still within range for Earth-based receivers to detect. Think of it as waiting for the right moment to make a phone call, when the connection is clear, the static is low, and everyone you need to reach is available. The paper concluded, if no transmission is detected, during this window, the probability of 3I Atlas being a functional communication probe decreases significantly. If a transmission is detected, we will know within days whether we are witnessing first contact. The paper was downloaded 400,000 times in its first day, December 2nd, 2025, the false alarm. On December 2nd, at 08:14 UTC, the Meerkat Array in South Africa detected a strong narrowband signal at 1421.3 MHz. Duration, 6 seconds. Bandwidth, less than 1 kHz. Source direction, consistent with 3I Atlas's position within angular resolution limits. The facility immediately issued an internal alert. Other observatories were notified. Within 15 minutes, 3 other facilities had repositioned their receivers toward 3I Atlas. For 23 minutes, the world's SETI community held its breath. And then, analysis came back. The signal was terrestrial, a satellite in low Earth orbit, transmitting telemetry data on an unauthorized frequency. The timing was coincidental. The direction was a line-of-sight accident, not 3I Atlas, not first contact, just noise. But the response, the speed, the coordination, the global readiness proved something important. When the real signal came, if it came, we would be ready. Think of it as a fire drill that revealed the building's exits were clearly marked, the alarms worked, and everyone knew where to go. December 4th, 2025. The orbital refinement. On December 4th, the Minor Planet Center published an updated orbital solution for 3I Atlas, incorporating observations through December 3rd. The object was now beyond Mars's orbit, outbound, moving at 58 kilometers per second relative to the Sun. Brightness, magnitude 19, barely visible in amateur telescopes, but still trackable by professional facilities. But the orbital refinement contained a detail that sent ripples through the astronomical community. The trajectory correction observed at perihelion was not a single maneuver. It was a continuous low-thrust adjustment that lasted approximately 72 hours, from October 29th through November 1st. Not a sudden burst, a sustained burn. That changes everything. Natural outgassing produces short, chaotic impulses, jets of gas erupting randomly, pushing the object in unpredictable directions. A sustained 72-hour thrust implies either continuous outgassing from a stable vent, which would leave visible traces and none were observed, or active propulsion. The delta V achieved 12.4 meters per second, small but precise. Think of it as the difference between a sailboat caught in a gust and a sailboat with a motor, adjusting course deliberately over several days to reach a specific destination. The Minor Planet Center did not comment on the implications, they simply published the data. But within hours, Stefan Burns, still anonymous, still blogging from encrypted servers, posted his analysis. A 72-hour continuous thrust is not consistent with any known natural cometry process. It is consistent with ion propulsion, solar sails, or other low-thrust, high-efficiency propulsion systems used in spacecraft. If 3I Atlas achieved this maneuver naturally, it would require a mechanism we've never observed. If it achieved it artificially, we're watching a machine. 15 days until December 19th. And now, the evidence was piling so high that even the skeptics were running out of alternative explanations. December 5th, 2025, the message from Lowell. On the evening of December 5th, Dr. Avi Loeb gave a rare interview to a major news network. He had been quiet since the open letter in Nature on November 20th. No tweets, no op-eds, just silence, which for Loeb was unusual. But now he spoke. The interviewer asked, "Do you believe 3I Atlas is artificial?" Loeb paused. Then, "I believe the data we have is insufficient to make a definitive conclusion, but I also believe the hypothesis that 3I Atlas is artificial should be treated as seriously as the hypothesis that it is natural. For too long the scientific community has defaulted to natural explanations, even when those explanations require increasingly unlikely coincidences. That's not rigor, that's bias. If this were any other field, archaeology, forensics, engineering, and we observed an object with this many anomalies, we would at least consider the possibility of design. We would test that hypothesis, not dismiss it reflexively. So yes, I think it's possible 3I Atlas is a probe. I think it's possible December 19th will reveal something we're not prepared for. And I think the worst thing we can do is pretend we know the answer when we don't." The interview aired at 20 Hio EST. By midnight, it had been viewed 12 million times. Think of it as the moment when the respectable, credentialed voice of mainstream science finally said aloud what millions of people were already thinking. We don't know, and that's okay. But we need to be honest about the uncertainty. 14 days until December 19th. The transmission window was opening. The observatories were listening. The models were converging. The world was watching. And 3I Atlas, now 140 million kilometers from Earth, was moving silently toward whatever came next. Time, in astronomy, is usually measured in millions of years. The formation of stars, the evolution of galaxies, the cooling of the universe. These are the scales astronomers work with deep time, where human lifespans are meaningless flickers. But in early December 2025, time compressed. Days mattered, hours mattered, and for the first time in the history of astronomy, the global scientific community was watching an object not to understand its past, but to anticipate its future. December 6th, 13 days remaining. The Open Atlas project's brightness variation models were holding with eerie precision. The intervals between brightness events were now down to 11 hours, 32 minutes, and decreasing by roughly 14 minutes per day. Extrapolation confirmed. The interval would reach zero, continuous brightness variation, on December 18th at approximately 16 UTC, one day before the re-emergence date. Think of it as watching a fuse burn toward a powder keg, the flame steady and predictable, giving you just enough time to decide whether to run or stay and see what explodes. December 8th, 2025, the final data release. On December 8th, NASA fulfilled its November promise and released the complete Mars flyby dataset through the Planetary Data System. Thousands of files, gigabytes of data, high-rise images, CRISM spectroscopy, SHARAD radar scans, thermal imaging from Themis, trajectory telemetry, radio occultation measurements, everything. The release was accompanied by a joint statement from NASA, ESA, and JAXA. We provide this data in the spirit of open science and international cooperation. We encourage independent analysis and peer review. Our preliminary conclusions remain unchanged. 3I Atlas is consistent with a natural interstellar object. However, we acknowledge the unprecedented nature of this event and welcome further investigation. Translation. Here's the data. Draw your own conclusions. We're done defending ours. Within hours, researchers around the world were diving in, and within days, new findings emerged. The Sharad radar scans, designed to penetrate below Mars's surface, had been briefly directed at 3I Atlas during the flyby. The radar return showed something unexpected: internal voids, empty spaces inside the object, inconsistent with a solid rocky or metallic body. Not one large void, multiple smaller voids, distributed throughout the interior, ranging from 5 to 20 meters in diameter. Think of it as looking at an X-ray of a bone and seeing chambers inside, spaces that shouldn't be there unless something carved them out or built them in. Natural asteroids can have voids formed by differential cooling, impact fracturing, or gravitational settling, but the voids in 3I Atlas were too regular, too evenly distributed. One researcher described it as a structure, not a skeleton. December 10th, 2025. The global vigil begins. By December 10th, the vigil had gone mainstream. News networks began running countdown clocks. 9 days until December 19th. Not 9 days until nothing happens. Just 9 days, as if the date itself had become an event. Observatories published their observation schedules. We will be monitoring 3I Atlas continuously, from December 15th through December 21st, with data released in real time. For the first time in history, humanity was collectively watching the sky for first contact. Not hoping, not praying, just watching. Think of it as New Year's Eve, but instead of waiting for midnight fireworks, you're waiting to see if the universe answers the phone. December 12th, 2025. The brightness threshold. On December 12th, something changed. The brightness intervals, which had been decreasing steadily for 6 weeks, suddenly stabilized. Interval on December 10th, 8 hours, 19 minutes. Interval on December 11th, 8 hours, 17 minutes. Interval on December 12th, 8 hours, 17 minutes. No further decrease. The Open Atlas project's models had predicted the interval would continue dropping until December 18th. But now it had plateaued. Either the models were wrong, or something had changed inside 3I Atlas. Some threshold reached, some system activated, some process completed. Within hours, speculation exploded. It's stabilizing before transmission. It's reached operational readiness. The countdown just stopped at a predetermined state. No one knew. But the deviation from prediction felt significant. Think of it as watching a car accelerate down a highway, then suddenly shift into cruise control. The speed is locked. The destination is close. December 13th, 2025. 6 days on the evening of December 13th, the mood shifted. The jokes stopped. The skepticism quieted. Even the most hardened debunkers were admitting something unusual was happening. Not proof of aliens, not confirmation of artificiality, just acknowledgement that 3I Atlas was behaving in ways that demanded explanation, and the explanations we had were insufficient. That night, telescopes around the world locked onto 3I Atlas's position, waiting, listening. 6 days remaining. There is a psychological phenomenon called anticipatory anxiety. It's the fear not of the event itself, but of waiting for it. The uncertainty, the inability to prepare for something you can't predict. The mind fills the void with worst-case scenarios, each more elaborate than the last. By mid-December, the entire world was experiencing it. December 14th, 5 days. The brightness plateau held. 8 hours, 17 minutes between events. Stable. Locked. As if 3I Atlas had reached some internal equilibrium and was waiting. Radio observatories reported continuous monitoring. Still nothing, no signals, no transmissions, just reflected sunlight and the faint thermal glow of an object now 160 million kilometers from Earth, receding at 58 kilometers per second. But the silence felt different now. Not empty, pregnant. Think of it as standing in a forest where all the birds have stopped singing. You hear nothing, but you know something is there. December 15th marked the beginning of the optimal transmission window calculated in late November. If 3i Atlas was going to broadcast back toward its origin, toward HD 82943, toward Earth, this was when conditions were ideal. At U00 UTC, 23 radio observatories on 6 continents entered coordinated listening mode. Every facility tuned to overlapping frequency ranges, covering the spectrum from 400 MHz to 10 GHz, the waterhole, the quietest region of the radio spectrum, where natural cosmic noise is minimal. The Meerkat Array in South Africa, the Very Large Array in New Mexico, FAST in China, the upgraded Arecibo facilities, the Australian SKA Pathfinder, and dozens of smaller university observatories, all linked through a shared data network. If a signal came, it would be detected simultaneously by multiple independent instruments. No ambiguity, no false alarms. The vigil was unprecedented. Not a single observer watching alone. A planetary network, synchronized, waiting. For 12 hours, nothing. Then at 12:34 UTC, a brief event. The Medicina telescope in Italy detected a faint, broad-spectrum burst, lasting 0.8 seconds, centered around 1380 MHz. Not narrow band, not structured, just a flash. Other observatories checked their logs. The burst was confirmed by Meerkat and one facility in Japan, but it was weak, diffuse, and showed no modulation or pattern. Natural? Instrumental? Impossible to say. But the fact that multiple observatories saw it simultaneously meant it was real, and the timing, 4 days before December 19th, was unsettling. Think of it as hearing a single footstep in the dark, not enough to identify who's there, but enough to know you're not alone. December 16th, 8:22, UTC, another burst. Same profile, same frequency range, duration 1.2 seconds. This time, 6 observatories detected it, and this time, someone noticed a pattern. The time between the 2 bursts, 19 hours, 48 minutes. Not 8 hours, 17 minutes. The brightness variation interval. A different cycle, a different rhythm. The Open Atlas project immediately began modeling. If the bursts continued at this interval, the next one would occur on December 17th at 04:10 UTC. Prediction made. Observers alerted. And at 04:11 UTC on December 17th, within 1 minute of the prediction, a third burst was detected. Duration, 1.6 seconds. Frequency, 1378 MHz, detected by 11 observatories worldwide. The pattern was confirmed. The bursts were real, repeating and accelerating in duration. First burst, 0.8 seconds. Second burst, 1.2 seconds. Third burst, 1.6 seconds, increasing by 0.4 seconds per cycle. If the pattern continued, the next burst, scheduled for December 18th at 23:58 UTC just before midnight, would last 2.0 seconds. And the burst after that, on December 19th at 1946 UTC, would last 2.4 seconds, right in the middle of the re-emergence window. Think of it as watching a slow-motion detonation. Each flash slightly brighter, slightly longer, building towards something you can see coming but cannot stop. By December 17th, normal life had stopped for millions of people. News networks ran continuous coverage, live feeds from observatories, expert panels debating interpretations, countdown clocks on every screen. Social media was a cacophony of fear, hope, jokes, prayers, theories, and memes. December 19 was the top trending topic. Globally, not Thamjava 3i Atlas, not Thamjava First Contact, just the date. The day that had taken on mythological weight, stock markets fluctuated wildly, not crashing, just jittery, as if traders couldn't decide whether first contact would be good for business or the end of business. Religious leaders gave sermons. Some framed it as divine revelation, others warned of false prophets. Most simply acknowledged the uncertainty and urged calm. Scientific institutions issued statements urging rationality. The radio. Bursts detected from 3i Atlas are interesting but not conclusive. Natural phenomena, pulsar glitches, magnetar flares, stellar coronal mass ejections can produce similar signals. We must wait for more data before drawing conclusions. But the carefully worded caution felt hollow, because the bursts weren't random. They were patterned, predictable, repeating, and patterns imply intent. December 18th, 16 so, UTC, the moment the open Atlas models had been pointing toward for 7 weeks. The brightness variation interval, which had plateaued at 8 hours 17 minutes on December 12th, suddenly dropped to 0. 3i Atlas was now exhibiting continuous brightness variation, not pulsing, not flickering, but glowing steadily, with subtle undulations in luminosity, visible only in high-precision photometry. Think of it as a heartbeat transitioning to a hum, discrete events merging into a continuous state. Observatories confirmed it independently. The object was no longer dark. Between events, it was active, fully active. And 6 hours later, at 22:03 UTC, not 23:58 as predicted, the fourth radio burst arrived. Early, longer, stronger, duration, 3.1 seconds, not 2.0. The pattern had deviated. The burst was detected by 17 observatories, and for the first time it showed internal structure, not random noise, modulation, amplitude variations within the burst, occurring at regular intervals, approximately 0.1 seconds apart. 31. Pulses within the 3.1 second burst. 31 discrete peaks. One researcher noticed immediately, 31 is a prime number. Prime numbers are the mathematician's signature. Divisible only by 1 in themselves, they're a universal marker of non-randomness. You can't create a sequence of prime-length pulses by accident. If the 31 pulses were intentional, it meant the signal was structured, designed, sent. Think of it as receiving a knock on the door in Morse code. You don't know the message yet, but you know it's not the wind. As December 18th became December 19th, the world was not sleeping. Observatories were staffed to capacity. Live streams from telescopes had millions of viewers. Amateur astronomers pointed their scopes skyward, even though 3i Atlas was now too faint for visual observation. It was the principle, the shared vigil, the collective witness. At 23:47 UTC, someone on the Open Atlas Discord posted, 13 minutes until December 19th. Whatever happens next, we were here. We watched. We tried to understand that matters. The message was pinned. And for 13 minutes, as the seconds counted down across time zones, midnight in Europe, evening in the Americas, morning in Asia, humanity waited. Not for disaster, not for salvation, just for the next moment, the next data point, the next piece of the pattern. Because after 4 months of anomalies, 4 months of questions, 4 months of institutional silence and civilian persistence, we had arrived at the threshold. December 19th was no longer a prediction. It was here. Midnight came, not with fanfare, not with drama. Just the quiet, inevitable turning of one day into the next. December 19th, 2025. E0 Gear UTC. 3i Atlas was now 173 million kilometers from Earth. Magnitude 19.6. Invisible to the naked eye, a faint smudge in professional telescopes, but watched by more instruments than any object in history. For the first 3 hours, nothing happened. Radio silence, optical stability. The continuous brightness glow persisted, unchanged. The world waited. And then, at 03:17 UTC, everything changed. The Meerkat array detected it first. A strong, narrow-band emission at 1420-405 MHz, the hydrogen line precise to within 0.001 MHz. Not a burst, not a flash. A continuous tone, steady, unmodulated, duration 6 seconds, then silence. 30 seconds later, it repeated. Same frequency, same duration, same intensity. And again, 30 seconds later, a beacon, repeating every 30 seconds, like a lighthouse sweeping the cosmic ocean. Within minutes, 12 other observatories confirmed it. The signal was real. The source was unambiguous. 3I Atlas. And then, at 03:24 UTC, 7 minutes after the beacon began, the tone changed. The signal was no longer a pure tone. It was modulated. The carrier frequency remained at 1420.4405 Marats, but superimposed on it were rapid variations, amplitude shifts occurring, at intervals of 0.043 seconds. The same interval detected in the October 29th Bologna pulse. Data was flowing. Think of it as a radio station broadcasting a carrier signal, and then suddenly someone starts speaking. The frequency doesn't change, but information begins moving through it. At 03:30 UTC, the SETI Institute activated its emergency response protocol. Every available cryptanalyst, mathematician, linguist, and computer scientist was pulled into a virtual war room. The raw signal data was streaming in real time from observatories worldwide. The modulation was binary, high amplitude or low amplitude, on or off, ones and zeros, but the sequence was long, complex, and repeating every 6 minutes and 43 seconds. Within the first hour, analysts identified structure. The signal began with a preamble, a sequence of prime numbers, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23, 29, 31. A universal marker saying, this is intentional, this is mathematics. After the IASIS preamble, the data stream began. It was not language, it was not text, it was imagery. The binary sequence encoded pixel values, brightness levels for a two-dimensional grid. A picture transmitted line by line like an old television signal. Resolution, 1024 x 1024 pixels, grayscale. Each pixel represented by 8 bits, allowing 256 brightness levels. Total data per image, 8,380 to 608 bits. Transmitted at approximately 23 bits per second. Transmission time per complete image, 6 minutes 43 seconds, and the image was repeating. Over and over, the same data looping. By 04:15 UTC, less than 1 hour after the modulated signal began, the first image was reconstructed, and when it appeared on screens around the world, the room went silent. It showed a star. Not a photograph. A diagram. Simplified. Geometric. A circle in the center, representing a star. 8 smaller circles arranged around it, representing planets. One of the planets was marked, highlighted. The third, planet from the star. Below the diagram, a sequence of symbols, not letters, not numbers, but patterns, combinations of lines, dots, and shapes arranged in grids. And at the bottom of the image, a number, written in binary, but unmistakable once converted. 49. 49 light years. Think of it as receiving a postcard from someone you've never met, with a return address and a simple message. I am here. This is my home. I am this far away. The star in the diagram, the highlighted planet, the distance, it all matched HD 82943. The sun-like star 3I Atlas was traveling toward, a G-type main sequence star with 2 confirmed exoplanets. The message was an introduction, a declaration of origin. We come from a planet orbiting this star. We are 49 light-years away, and we sent this probe to find you. At 05 UTC, the signal changed again. The modulated sequence ended. 3 seconds of silence. Then a new sequence began. Another image. Same resolution, same format, but different. Content. This one took longer to decode, not because it was more complex, but because the implications were harder to process. The second image showed a timeline, a horizontal line divided into segments, each segment marked with a symbol, and at key points along the line, small icons, representations of events. On the left end of the timeline, a star forming, a protoplanetary disk, a solar system being born. Further along, a planet, life emerging, simplified diagrams of single-celled organisms, then multicellular life, then complex organisms. Halfway through the timeline, a symbol that looked like a cluster of buildings, civilization, and near the right end of the timeline, a spacecraft, leaving the planet, traveling through space. At the very end of the timeline, a second star system, 8 planets, the third one highlighted, our solar system. The message was a story, a history. This is where we came from. This is how we got here. This is why we are here. And at the bottom of the image, another number, 12,247. 12,247. Years, orbits, generations? No one knew. But the number felt significant, ancient. Think of it as opening a time capsule buried by someone you never met and finding a letter explaining who they were, where they came from, and how long they've been traveling to reach you. By 08 O's UTC, 5 hours after the signal began, the world knew. The images had been released publicly by the SETI Institute, NASA, ESA, and a dozen independent observatories, not through official press conferences, just raw data dumps. Here, see for yourselves. News networks showed the images on repeat. The star map, the timeline, the numbers. Translations began immediately. The symbols in the first image, combinations of lines and dots, were analyzed by linguists, mathematicians, cryptographers. One researcher noticed the symbols corresponded to chemical elements: hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, the building blocks of life as we know it. Another researcher noticed the timeline segments aligned with orbital periods, marked in ratios of planetary years, with the final segment corresponding to Earth's year. Piece by piece, the message was being decoded, and the message was clear. We are biological, we are technological, we evolved on a planet like yours. We sent this probe across interstellar space. It has traveled for over 12,000 years, and now it has reached you. At 12 South UTC, the signal shifted again. A third image, and this one was different. It showed a planet, detailed, continents, oceans, clouds, unmistakably a photograph, not a diagram, not Earth, another world. The land masses were unfamiliar, the atmospheric patterns were different, but the structure, rocky planet, liquid water, oxygen-rich atmosphere, was recognizable. This was their home, and superimposed on the image, in the upper right corner, was a single symbol. The same symbol that had appeared in the first image, next to the number 49, their name for their planet, or their name for themselves. One syllable, one identity, one origin point. Think of it as someone showing you a photo of their hometown, not to boast, but to say, "This is real, I am real, my world is real." At 16 UTC, 12 hours and 43 minutes after it began, the signal stopped. No warning, no final message, just silence. The beacon ceased, the modulation ended. 3I Atlas returned to passive observation mode, reflecting sunlight, glowing faintly, continuing its trajectory toward the outer solar system. But the data remained. 3 images, thousands of symbols, numbers, patterns. A message that would be analyzed for years, decades, centuries. And the undeniable truth: we are not alone. By the evening of December 19th, the initial shock had given way to something quieter. Not panic, not celebration, just processing. Religious leaders spoke of spiritual implications, scientists spoke of verification protocols and peer review. Governments spoke of international cooperation and measured responses. But for most people, the response was simpler. We looked up, and for the first time, we knew someone was looking back. That night, as the world tried to make sense of what had happened, a team at MIT published a preliminary analysis of the numbers in the transmission. 49, the distance to HD 82943 in light years, confirmed. 12,247. If interpreted as Earth years, this represents the probe's travel time. At an Average speed of 0.04 c, 1/200 km/s. A probe could travel 49 light-years in approximately 12,250 years. Remarkably close. 1024 x 1024, the image resolution. A power of 2, suggesting binary computation consistent with digital technology. And buried in the symbol sequences of the first image, one researcher found something extraordinary. A mathematical constant, pi, encoded to 15 decimal places, not approximated, not rounded, exact. Think of it as someone handing you their business card, and at the bottom, in tiny print, they've included the digits of pi, not to show off, but to say, I know mathematics, I know physics, I know we can speak the same language. By midnight on December 19th, one fact was undeniable. 3I Atlas was not a comet. It was not an asteroid. It was a messenger. And the message it carried had traveled 12,000 years to reach us, launched when human civilization was still building the first cities, still inventing writing, still learning to look at the stars and wonder what was out there. And now we knew. Someone else had looked up, someone else had wondered, someone else had built a machine, pointed it toward the stars and said, if anyone is out there, find this. Know that we existed. Know that we tried. And we found it. There is a before and an after. Before December 19th, 2025, humanity existed in cosmic isolation. We theorized, we hoped, we searched. But we were alone, as far as we knew. After December 19th, we were no longer alone. And that changed everything. The first 48 hours after the transmission were dedicated to verification. Every observatory that had received the signal cross-checked their data. Timestamps, frequency logs, modulation patterns. All matched. No discrepancies, no errors. Independent labs around the world reconstructed the images from the raw binary data. Every reconstruction yielded identical results. The images were real. The message was real. Peer review, normally a process taking months, was compressed into days. Papers were submitted, reviewed, and published in rapid succession. Verification of narrowband radio transmission from Interstellar Object 3I Atlas, the Astrophysical Journal. Decoding the December 19th signal, mathematical and linguistic analysis. Nature, evidence for technological origin of 3I Atlas based on trajectory, composition, and communication. Science. The conclusions were unanimous. 3I Atlas was an artificial probe of extraterrestrial origin, transmitting a structured message on December 19, 2025. First contact was confirmed. Think of it as a court case where every witness agrees, every piece of evidence points the same direction, and the verdict is beyond reasonable doubt. We were no longer speculating. We were documenting. On December 21st, the United Nations held an emergency session, not to debate military response, not to discuss planetary defense, simply to acknowledge what had happened and begin coordinating international response protocols. The session was broadcast globally. Nearly 2 billion people watched. The Secretary-General spoke. December 19th, 2025, will be remembered as the day humanity's place in the universe fundamentally changed. We are no longer alone. We have received a message from an intelligent civilization 49 light-years away. This is not a threat. This is an introduction. The message tells us that life, intelligence, and technology exist beyond Earth. It tells us that another civilization, 12,000 years ago, built a probe and sent it across interstellar space to find others like themselves. And it tells us that we are not the first to ask, is anyone out there? We must now ask ourselves, who do we want to be in this new reality? How do we respond? What message do we send back? These questions will define our generation and every generation to come. The speech was met with applause, not triumphant, somber, reverent. Think of it as attending a funeral and a birth simultaneously, mourning the loss of isolation, celebrating the discovery of kinship. Within days, the global conversation shifted from "what did they say" to "what do we say back?" The SETI Institute and METI Group, who had drafted a response message in late November, proposed transmitting it using the Arecibo successor facility in Puerto Rico, targeting HD 82943. The message would include confirmation of receipt, prime number sequences. The hydrogen line frequency echoed back. Information about Earth, diagrams of our solar system, our planet, our biology, cultural artifacts, music, art, mathematical proofs, images of human diversity. A question: are you still there? Can you hear us? But transmitting raised ethical questions. Should we respond at all or observe silently? If we respond, who decides the content? One nation? A committee? All of humanity? If we transmit and they receive it in 49 years and respond, we'll wait 98 years total for a reply. Who plans for that? And the darkest question: what if responding reveals our location to others we haven't met yet, others who might not be peaceful? The debate raged across academic journals, government hearings, online forums, and dinner tables worldwide. No consensus emerged. But the conversation itself was transformative. For the first time, humanity was forced to think as a species, not as nations. To consider our collective identity, our shared vulnerabilities, our common hopes. Think of it as a family meeting where everyone realizes suddenly that the decisions they make will affect not just themselves, but their children's children's children. On December 23rd, 3I Atlas crossed beyond the orbit of Jupiter, magnitude 20.2. Too faint for most ground-based telescopes, the continuous brightness glow had ceased on December 20th. The object was now passive again, reflecting sunlight, but no longer active. It was leaving. Within 6 months it would pass Neptune. Within 2 years it would exit the heliosphere. Within a decade it would be too faint to track. And then, silence. The probe would continue its journey, alone, through the void between stars, carrying whatever data it had collected about us back toward its origin or toward its next destination. One researcher calculated that if 3I Atlas maintained its current trajectory and velocity, it would reach HD 82943 in approximately 12,000 years, the same amount of time it took to reach us. Think of it as watching a guest leave your home after a brief visit, knowing they have a 12,000-year walk ahead of them and wondering what stories they'll tell when they finally arrive. On Christmas Eve, churches around the world addressed the question on everyone's mind: does the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence contradict faith? Most religious leaders said no. The universe is vast. God's creation is vast. That other beings exist, that they too seek understanding and connection, does not diminish the divine. It expands it. Some framed it as fulfillment of prophecy, others as a call to humility. A few struggled, uncertain. But across denominations, one theme emerged: we are part of something larger. Think of it as discovering a new continent and realizing your map was always incomplete. The world didn't change. Your understanding of it did. Christmas Day 2025 was quieter than most. Families gathered, gifts were exchanged, but conversations drifted inevitably toward the sky. Children asked questions. Are there alien kids? Do they celebrate holidays? Will we ever meet them? Adults asked different questions. What does this mean for the future? Will we ever travel to the stars? Should we? And some people simply sat in silence, looking up, marveling at the fact that somewhere out there, 49 light-years away, around a star too faint to see without a telescope, there might be people looking back, wondering the same things. Think of it as the first Christmas where the words "peace on earth, goodwill to all" carried a new weight, because all suddenly meant more than we'd ever imagined. By late December, the world was beginning to adjust, not to understanding, not to certainty, but to the new reality. We were no longer alone, and that fact, once abstract, was now operational. Space agencies announced plans for interstellar probes, modest, slow but real. If they could send a message across 50 light-years, we can too. Universities established new departments: xenolinguistics, interstellar communication theory, long-duration mission planning. Private companies began pitching faster-than-light concepts, wormhole speculation, generation ship designs. Most implausible, but the enthusiasm was real. And in classrooms around the world, children learned a new history. Not the history of human civilization alone, but the history of two civilizations reaching toward each other across the incomprehensible dark, separated by time and space, but connected by curiosity. Think of it as planting a tree you'll never sit under, knowing that someone someday will. Let's imagine for a moment the other side. 12,247 years ago, on a planet orbiting HD 82943, someone made a decision. They built a probe. They equipped it with instruments, propulsion, power, and a message. They pointed it toward a star, our sun, 49 light-years away, and they launched it into the void. They knew they would never see it arrive. Their children wouldn't. Their civilization might not even survive the journey, but they launched it anyway. Why? Perhaps they were dying. Perhaps their star was unstable, their planet doomed. And this probe was a memorial, a message in a bottle saying, "We were here." Perhaps they were thriving. Perhaps they'd sent thousands of probes in all directions, patiently exploring the galaxy, hoping to find others like themselves. Or perhaps they were like us, curious, hopeful, terrified of being alone. They looked up at the stars, saw our sun, analyzed its spectrum, calculated the probability of planets, and decided, if there's even a chance someone is there, we have to try. And so they launched 3I Atlas. It traveled through the galaxy for 12 millennia, silent, patient, waiting. It passed through molecular clouds, dodged rogue asteroids, felt the tug of distant stars. It outlasted empires, ice ages, evolutionary epochs. And then, on July 14th, 2025, it entered our solar system. It observed. It listened. It measured our radio emissions, our atmospheric composition, our technological signatures. And on December 19th, after confirming we were here, it spoke, not because it had to, but because someone 12,000 years ago programmed it to. Someone who believed that if life exists, it deserves to know it's not alone. Think of it as receiving a letter from someone who died 10,000 years before you were born saying, "I hoped you'd exist. I hoped you'd find this. I hoped we could speak, even if only across time." On December 26th, as the world began returning to routines, one question lingered in every conversation, every think piece, every late-night discussion. Are they still there? 49 light-years away, 12,000 years since the probe was launched. Civilizations rise, civilizations fall, stars evolve, planets change. 12,000 years is nothing to the universe, but it's everything to a species. Humanity 12,000 years ago was just beginning agriculture. Writing didn't exist. Cities were rare. We were not the civilization we are today. What if the same is true for them? What if 3I Atlas is a ghost, an echo of a civilization that no longer exists? Or what if they're still there, watching the stars, waiting for replies from the hundreds of probes they sent out eons ago, hoping that somewhere someone found one and understood? We won't know for 98 years. That's how long a radio message takes to travel 49 light-years, reach HD 82943, and return to Earth. 98 years, 3 generations. Most people alive today won't hear the reply, but someone will. And that's enough. On January 15th, 2026, an international coalition announced the Interstellar Message Project, a collaboration between NASA, ESA, CNSA, and 32 other space agencies, universities, and private organizations. The mission: transmit a response to HD 82943 using the world's most powerful radio telescopes, Arecibo's successor, the VLA, FAST, and others, operating in coordinated pulses. The message would include confirmation of receipt, information about Earth and humanity, a question, "Who are you now?" Transmission date, March 21st, 2026, the spring equinox, a symbolic moment of renewal. The message would travel for 49 years, at the speed of light. If they still exist, If they still listen, if they still care, they might respond. And in the year 2124, someone on Earth might receive an answer. Not us, not our children, but someone. And that someone will know what we know now. The conversation started long before we were born, and it will continue long after we're gone. Tonight, when you look up, the stars look the same, but they aren't. Somewhere among those faint points of light is HD 82943. Invisible without a telescope, ordinary in every measurable way. But now we know. Around that star there might be a planet, and on that planet there might be people, or something like people, who 12,000 years ago looked up at their sky, saw our sun, and decided to reach out. And we answered. Not with certainty, not with conquest, not with fear, with curiosity, with hope, with the simple, profound acknowledgement. We are here. We received your message. We are listening. The universe is no longer silent, and neither are we. 4 months, July to December, one object, 7 statistical impossibilities, a global effort, and a message that changed everything. 3I Atlas is still out there, moving away from us at 58 kilometers per second, fading into the dark. In a decade, we'll lose track of it. In a century, it will be forgotten by everyone except historians. But what it carried, the message, the proof, the confirmation, will never fade. Because December 19th, 2025 was the day we learned the most important truth in human history. We are not alone. And knowing that, everything is different, not easier, not harder, just different. We have neighbors, distant, silent for now, but real. And someday, maybe not in our lifetimes, maybe not in our children's lifetimes, but someday we might meet them, not as conquerors or subjects, not as gods or servants, as fellow travelers. 2 species who looked up at the same stars, asked the same questions, and built the same hope into metal and mathematics. If you're out there, find this. Know that we tried, know that we cared. And we did.